This video is going to be just more of a rant. Hypocrisy, FIFA, and the world's hypocrisy. I'm not a soccer fan at all. However, it's kind of hard to doom scroll through social media without seeing some sort of like advertisement or reference to the energy around FIFA. And I've been paying attention to the news and just how these different countries move, considering that so much weight is put on the African American, on the black man. And they're criminals, they're unsafe, they're dangerous. Oh, a black woman was defending herself and she shot and killed a man. And just always this attention around black people and our experience in this world from different cultures. I noticed this. And everything that the world attacks or condemns black men, black women for, basically the world does these very same things. And it just irks me. I'm like, man, like the human race is just on a decline. It's on a decline. And I'm not saying the world revolves around black people, but just from my experience looking at the judgment and normalization of hypocrisy, double standards. It's just the human rules that they create and function from. It's just clearly on a decline. It really is. Salute to all my introverts. I understand. I get you. It's just really risky interacting with people and navigating and dealing with people today and how they move. And what I'm noticing from this whole FIFA sort of world is a lot of these different countries all around the world engage in some of the same behaviors they condemn African Americans for violence. Oh, these black people are too loud. They're too crazy. A lot of the FIFA fans from all around the world are doing some of the same things. Oh, black people are racist. Look at these Argentinians. They're racist as a motherfucker. That woman, how she was talking to Ice Show Speed, Monkey, you get back. I mean, just nasty ass people in this world. And a lot of what people say towards black people is really just how they feel about themselves and their own cultures or the experiences they have in their own cultures. And it's like a projection. Now, don't get me wrong, the black community is by no means perfect or innocent in the situation, right? However, it's not like black folks are the only persons who engage in these behaviors, but it just seems like it's more trendy and popular to attack black people. So FIFA, the one game that I watched, I think it was Mexico against England, and just all the chaos Mexico was putting on, the England team and just all around the different parts of the world and just the fighting and the violence. And I'm like, man, these are the same Mexicans who got so much to say about black people being violent or not being safe and keeping these stereotypes. And these guys are doing some of the same shit. It's just it just frustrates you sometimes how people could be so hypocritical. What is hypocrisy? Hypocrisy is the practice of claiming to have moral standards, beliefs, or virtues that one's own behavior does not match. It's the gap between what someone says they believe and what they actually do. The word comes from the ancient Greek hypocrisy, which literally meant acting on a stage or playing a part. And really, the world is a stage where a lot of people are just playing a part. They're just playing a role. They're not really fully living their truths or living an authentic, value driven life. They're just projecting all the hatred and negativity they had towards themselves in their own communities onto other people, essentially. Psychologists and philosophers generally break down hypocrisy into three distinct patterns. Duplicity is the first pattern, the false front, pretending to hold a virtue that you don't actually have in order to look good to others. Inconsistency, double standards, applying a strict moral rule to everyone else, but making a convenient exception for yourself, and blame shifting, harshly judging or condemning someone else for a flaw or behavior that you actively practice yourself. Why it happens. True hypocrisy usually stems from a desire for social status. The world is a dangerous thing. Now you understand as you start to see the corruption and the decline of the human intellect, because you guys see it. You're complaining about it all the time on YouTube. You're living it, you see it. And this is what God was talking about in the scripture. He who loves the world, right, has no love for God in him, right? You can't love the world and you can't love God. What is loving the world? Prioritizing and valuing social status, which by nature is going to come with you being a hypocrite. It's going to come with you having double standards. It's going to come with you blame shifting because you're so desperate to fit in. You're so desperate to look good in front of other people that you completely just abandon the ethics and morale that the whole scripture is built on. Loving your neighbor, right? Being joyful, making peace with your neighbors, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self control. All that goes out the window just because of social status. And the older I get, the more I realize how just weak it is to just be so desperate and driven by social status, and majority of people are the majority, and these are generally the people who will argue you until their head fall off, and when you try to challenge them or hold them accountable are usually the people who are the most gripped to this idea of social status. So to understand why hypocrisy is so incredibly common, it helps to look at it not just as a moral failure, but as a highly effective social strategy. It offers massive shortcuts in life, and when you mix it with the worldliness, the deep desire to align with public trends, material success, and social status, it becomes a survival mechanism for navigating modern groups. It's kind of hard to be a real believer and also prioritize being famous, having some sort of like social notoriety at the same time. It's really difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible. However, soon as you cross a certain threshold of fame and notoriety, a part of you in order to maintain that fame, that's the challenge with being famous. Is not getting famous but keeping it and staying famous. You have to sacrifice in a lot of ways a lot of your morale and ethics that contradict sort of like the demands of the general public. So, at its root, hypocrisy is a tool for maximizing reward while minimizing cost. It allows a person to enjoy two conflicting benefits at the same time. One, reputational wealth, the social reward. By loudly proclaiming high moral standards, supporting the right causes, or condemning the bad guys, the hypocrite secures trust, praise, and high status within their social circle. Freedom of action, the private reward. Living up to high moral standards is exhausting, restrictive, and often requires personal sacrifices. The hypocrite simply skips the sacrifice. They do whatever is easiest, cheapest, or most self serving in private while keeping their public crown. A weapon for defense and offense. Pointing out the flaws of others acts as a brilliant smokescreen. If a hypocrite is aggressive enough in judging others, people are far less likely to turn the spotlight on them. It shifts the burden of proof away from their own life. In short, hypocrisy gives someone all the social perks of being a saint with all the practical advantages of being a cynic. And from what I'm seeing, black people have no shame to admit what they do wrong, especially righteous black folks. You just see countless and countless videos of black people, even at the extent of just completely insulating themselves from their own communities, where they'll admit, yes, we have crime in our communities. We're not proud about it. We're trying to actively educate the youth. We're trying to implement certain approaches and ways to really, uproot our people out of this condition. I mean, you just see black people constantly speaking to the issues that are going on. Even channels where people are just being completely vulnerable, black men, about just their status in life, their state in life. Maybe they're sleeping in a van. Maybe they're kicked out, maybe they lost their job. I'm seeing nothing but just videos and videos of black people owning their shortcomings and their faults, right? And I'm not saying it's all black folks, because you got some out there who just have that double standard. But from what I'm seeing, a lot of black people are just, they just own it. Why worldliness perpetuates hypocrisy. When we talk about being worldly, we are talking about a mindset that prioritizes external metrics, reputation, status, wealth, and group acceptance over internal character or objective truth. When a society or subculture becomes highly worldly, hypocrisy doesn't just happen, it is actively incentivized because of two powerful human drivers: the desperate need to fit in. Human beings are hardwired to avoid social banishment. Historically, isolation meant death. That's one thing I notice about a lot of non-black cultures is sort of like the price you pay for being a part of a collectivistic culture is you have sort of like this seed of like desperate social desirability kind of ingrained in you, where it's hard to even see the individual in a lot of you guys because you're so, wired to prioritize the opinions of other people. And black people, even though at our root, we do have a history of collectivism, but we have sort of matured to a very individualistic group, probably one of the most individualistic groups that the world has ever seen present day. And when you have individualistic groups that approach collectivistic sort of like orientations, people will always kind of come off on the surface like they get you, they understand your ideas, yeah, I see where you're coming from, but at their core, they're going to be more loyal to their group. So black people got to understand when people are looking at you, they're looking at you like you're divided, which is another way of saying individualistic or individuated from your core sort of ethnic culture. So they're not looking at you guys like, oh, you guys, they'll look at you as a collective when it comes to like the stereotypes and the prejudices in your communities. But in terms of your righteousness, you're an individual. So there's like a splitting, that happens in a sense. So so it says here, in a highly connected worldly environment, the rules for belonging change rapidly. To fit in, people feel intense pressure to signal that they conform to the group's values. If they don't actually feel those values internally, they face a choice: risk being an outcast or perform the virtue. Most people choose to perform. So, the currency of social righteousness in a worldly culture, righteousness is often treated like currency. The goal isn't necessarily being good, it is appearing good to the gatekeepers of your social or professional circles. The government in America has to keep sort of like the dominant society for the most part. A lot of these non-black cultures, because black culture isn't the dominant society in terms of the data. I mean, they might have some of the dominant influence in certain areas, but the reality is non-blacks sort of like run the show. In the government, this is sort of like, I feel like a thorn in the government, because they hate, as much as they hate the people and they just want to strong arm them, they need the people because these are their military. These are the people that are going to be on the front lines. These are the people who are the ones that are going to have to sacrifice their life, because you're not going to see any politicians going on the front lines. So in a way, they have to kind of cater and enable and sort of, infantize the public. This is, which is why you'll see certain racial groups get certain privileges in the court systems and in the justice system over others, because in their minds they're looking at this like, we need to do as much as we can to appease these folks because we need them. If this country, if shit goes down, these are the ones that are going to be going to war. So they're looking at, they're like making bids essentially. And they're going to create any conditions that are necessary in a lot of ways to kind of keep this whole social desirability economy going. And it says here, and you notice this even too with Donald Trump trying to incorporate Bible studies. And, we're going to talk about the Bible, but talking about the Bible and actually living the Bible are two completely different things. And a lot of times, the people who are such in a hurry and in a race to kind of talk about scriptures and, you know, sort of on the outside looking in, try to glamorize, like, yeah, we're going to put the Bible in every school. Those be sometimes the most people that are not living biblically. So it says, because external perception is everything, the appearance of virtue becomes functionally identical to actual virtue. So you don't really have to be virtuous for, especially a lot of people from different foreign countries who don't really live here. All it takes is just for them to see an image of something, and that already becomes a deposit for their belief. Okay. And there's a lot of impressionable minds out here. So That's one thing, about the Black community I do appreciate is that our struggle, depending on who you are, because not all Black people are created equally, but the struggle for us has kind of created a sense of discernment and wisdom where you're just not going to run over on us. So, because external perception is everything, the appearance of virtue functionally is identical to actual virtue in the eyes of the public group. This creates a race to the top of moral signaling. People feel compelled to take louder, harsher stances on public issues to prove their allegiance to the group, even if their private lives are completely disconnected from those stances. When a culture values the image of goodness over the substance of character, it creates an environment where honest, flawed people are punished for their transparency, while polished hypocrites are rewarded for their performance. It creates a self perpetuating cycle as the social costs of being independent or imperfect rise. Psychological safety of hiding behind a hypocritical mask becomes most impossible for most people to